So for how you build and manage an effective relationship with the customers through successful communication.
Yep.
I said building relationships is a key point in growth and it's important that it's done correctly. There are different types of communication methods. Oh, here you go. This is where I'm going to start seeing all my spellings.
That's okay. So
And
we
to be
can.
able to create effective relationships is important. Verbal is used in face-to-face conversations over the phone via meeting platforms, either like Teams or Zoom. Non-verbal is a communications is all about body language, expressions, tone of. Sorry, this is going to be me just changing stuff.
That's okay. I'd say don't worry too much about changing it during Harriet. We can always change. We can always go through spelling and grammar afterwards.
Yeah, used in conversation and written communication as words. This could be email, letters, notes, or even social media.
Yeah, excellent.
How do you select the most appropriate medium and manner to communicate with customers? To be able to choose the correct medium, you go through a process or a channel, and this allows the chance to get to know the situation or the people.
Yeah,
Depending on what the situation between the business and the customer will depend on the route that will be chosen. During this process, it's important to look at urgency, formality, purpose, relationship, accessibility, and the information. Give an example of how you've adapted your communication approach to suit your audience. During my job and being away from my site managers, I must use a couple different communication approaches. My main approach is using written communication on Teams to ask general questions and get information. But there are some occasions where I need to change that depending on the situation, and I will turn to verbal communication via the phone. This will get the information straight away, as sometimes the
yeah,
customer can be on the phone and I would need the answer as soon as possible.
yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. So you've highlighted there how you're aware of different styles of communication,
yeah.
and you're aware of in what situations you might choose to adapt
Hmm.
and apply each one. So that
Yeah.
might be situation dependent, it might be person dependent, or
Yeah.
it might be time dependent as well. It might be time sensitive. So
Yeah.
that's really good. And you've demonstrated knowledge, skills application, and a practical example of that in all
Hmm.
of those, which is really good.
Yeah, cool. So give an example of when you've chaired a meeting. I chaired a meeting that was called a school and court forum. This allows us to talk about new things that we'd like to happen to make things better for us. I had some points to discuss from a previous meeting and then followed on to new ones.
Yeah. So you used a set agenda
Yeah.
to plan
Mhm.
and time manage it.
How do you ensure that facilitate the contribution of others when chairing a meeting? Please give a specific example. To allow everyone to contribute to the meeting, I allowed everyone to speak, as we have some team members who are more vocal than others.
Yeah.
Um, it's very important that the meeting it's very important for every meeting that is being held is that everyone has different process thoughts.
Yeah.
As Amy Smith explained in her TED talk, there are 4 different communication styles.
Yeah.
These include getting a feeling, ask the question of why by thinking into much more detail, and turning the words into pictures. So when chairing a meeting, it's important to understand the different communication process that might be happening. And in fact, they're not doing it to be rude, but it might take them a little longer to get an understanding,
Yeah.
or on the other hand, you might have someone that does all the talking and doesn't stop.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah, that's absolutely right, Harriet. So this is a really good example
Yeah,
of you understand the different that people not necessarily have different job titles,
yeah.
but within a team dynamic, and this is going to be something we look at in the next assignment as well,
Hmm.
that there are lots of different personalities and characters
Yeah.
in a team or in a room at any given time. there are going to be people that are more likely to stick their hand up and say, yeah, I haven't got a problem with standing up and talking in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And there's going to be people that might think that's my worst nightmare.
Mhm.
Even though I am quite knowledgeable on this and my input might be quite valuable, I'm not going to, that's not me.
Not
I'm not going
me.
to stand up in front of everybody and do that.
Yeah.
So an interesting one, again, looking back on work that we've done so far, might be not just personality traits and characters, but also learning styles as well.
Yeah.
So how you might accommodate different learning styles when you chair a meeting.
Yeah.
You might take into consideration that, some people learn better through verbal explanation, which is quite good if you're standing in front of a group of people and giving a verbal explanation.
Yeah.
However, for certain, if you were to give a presentation, for example, you might then like show people pictures or give them a visual
Yeah.
to look at to accommodate a different need. You might introduce, if you've got enough time within a presentation, you might introduce like um, a practical exercise. So
Mhm.
people learn better through doing.
Yeah.
So you're accommodating kinesthetic learning as well.
Mhm.
So these are all good examples, but I was going to say, I was going to go on and say, how you would you accommodate them as well. But I know that there are questions after this that will cover that.
Yeah.
But that's really, really good.
Cool.
That you take into account different personalities, different characters, not just different job roles,
Yeah.
of how things might be incorporated, how you might go about accommodating different people's learning, just to make
Mhm.
sure everyone gets a chance to speak.
Yeah.
And again, I think you expand on that in one of the questions a little bit
Yeah. I think
later
there
on
is
as
another
well.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So give an example of a presentation you've made to the team. Um, every day within our job role, we always present something that happens during our day or something new that we've potentially learned.
Yeah.
Um, so when this does happen, I try to go with enough information to be able to give my team to allow my team to get a good understanding of what I'm explaining. This is useful as we have, again, a mixture of different personalities, and this allows me to have clear face-to-face communication. Because we do our meetings in person as such,
Yeah.
I don't normally have anything set up, but I will normally like jot down key bullet points, and then we'd have a discussion from it, um, and things like that. Um, So then give an example of a presentation you've made to management. Um, I don't do this a lot, but the one time I have done it, it worked in my favour.
Okay,
So
that's good.
I had difficulty with one of my site managers, in terms of he was not allowing me to book a school on, and things like that. So I went away and I came back with some data which I presented to him to be able to get my point across.
Yeah.
Um, as the site manager was not in a driving distance to be able to have this conversation face to face, I had to contact a message to send that would get my point across, but making sure it also didn't come across in a disrespectful manner.
Yeah.
So I sometimes I find that myself, if I need to be a little bit more firm and stern and stuff, I find that it's easier for me to jot that down in a message,
Yeah.
um, to be able to get that to them. So I did that, sent the data over, and then I was able to book that school in.
Yeah. Amazing.
Um, So give an example of how you've approached a challenging conversation. So as an example, within my role, sometimes we must deliver bad news during our busy period as the customer I deal with is not in a realistic distance. I must deliver this via the phone if possible.
Yeah.
A phone call is always my first option as it allows to show empathy and try to resolve the issue there and then, much more professional than going back and forth in an email.
Yeah.
Um,
That's applying emotional intelligence,
yeah,
Harriet, as well, isn't it?
yeah.
To be able to show empathy, to be able to read the situation or read the
Mhm.
room, like can
Yeah.
actually speak to somebody face to face. That can we we looked at, in fact, we might look at a little bit later on in this assignment, how different forms of communication can sometimes be misconstrued. And if you're constantly emailing, you might think, how I'm not sure how to take that.
Yeah,
Whereas if it's face to face or if it's over the phone, you can get a grasp of how they're saying things and the tone of their
yeah,
voice and things like that. So
yeah, and
yeah,
almost like how they're feeling as well without
a-
actually being with them.
yeah, absolutely.
So how to explain how to provide constructive feedback. Constructive feedback allows people to gain an insight of their weaknesses and give them ways to improve them, meaning that mostly constructive feedback is positive. Constructive feedback is a good communication skills which should be used in all working environments. When providing this form of feedback, it's important to be right and clear to make sure the points come across in a correct way. So
Yeah,
starting the meeting in a positive way will lead the meeting in the right direction.
yeah,
Give an example of when you gave constructive feedback. Um, I give constructive feedback more so in a way that I probably don't set a meeting as such, like I do it without probably realizing, as
yeah.
like it's not like a physical meeting between
Okay.
me and someone else. So
Yeah,
I give constructive feedback when someone is working on an event for one of my sites that I work closely with, and sometimes they'll call me to make sure that what they're doing is correct, and this is to like ensure that everything goes smoothly, so then obviously the customer journey isn't affected, and we're also still um holding and gaining more respect from our site managers that we work with,
yeah,
and still having a good relationship with them. But when there's something that I don't think is right is when I'll give the constructive feedback. So there'll be times where I believe something is not right. I'll let them know so they can put it right. And this will normally be in an informal chat, and they know
yeah,
what my points are going, and they know that my points that I say are going to put them in a better position with the site team and also the customer, so there'll be no upset.
yeah. Can you think of a specific example when that's actually happened, um, Harriet, at all?
What when someone if something's not gone.
Yeah, where you've had to give them constructive feedback.
So I have a site um manager who's very, very picky.
Yeah,
And it literally only happened the other day, and my colleague called me and was like, "Can I like double check things?" And I actually was like, "Oh, do this and do that because it will keep the site manager happy, and if
yeah,
she and then it gives her the control as well, but it also puts my colleague in a good position because she's covering her back.
yeah,
So we're not upsetting anyone.
yeah. Excellent.
So yeah,
Okay, excellent. That's the only reason I asked for an example, Harriet, is when this more for use at the end of the course. It might sound crazy talking about the end of the course now,
yeah.
but you might get asked questions on this at the end of the course during your endpoint assessment
Oh, okay,
discussion.
yeah.
So if you can think of actual examples
Yeah.
of when this kind of stuff has happened,
Mhm.
you will have ready made it. You will have ready made answers when it
Yeah.
gets to the end of the course.
Okay. Evaluate your ability to build rapport with an audience, including customers. So, um, again, kind of elaborating for what I haven't written. Um, I have quite a good relationship with all of my customers that I deal with because I'm quite like I'm not there's times where I need to be formal, but I am very much an informal person in terms of the customers that I deal with.
Yeah,
For that reason, most of them are like teachers and stuff, so they enjoy um having a good chat about other things. I learn stuff about them as well,
yeah,
but um I wouldn't be like that if I didn't have the training that I had at the beginning of my time at
yeah,
Go Ape. So when I joined the company, our manager put us through a week's training on dealing with the customer.
yeah,
The main purpose of the training was to be able to learn to what needed to be said to create that rapport with the customer and also achieve the sale. Um,
yeah,
by doing this, it'll either end in a sale or not, but it would also end if it didn't end with the sale, it would put me in a position that I'm in a good relationship with the customer that I've spoken to,
Yeah.
and they know that the information that I've given them is useful, helpful, everything that they need, so they can come back to me
Yeah.
if they was wanting to do something.
Yeah.
Um, so that's why I mentioned that it allows me to spend time with the customer on the phone to get a real understanding of what it is they want to achieve.
Yeah. I think that relates back to question number one, Harriet, as well. The
Yeah,
fact that you make the effort to spend time with
yeah,
customers, getting to know them a little bit more,
mhm,
and again on the basis that the more you get to know, the more that you get to build relationships and rapport with people, the more you get
yeah,
to know more about them.
yeah,
Once you know more about them, you can then tailor your approach and use
yeah,
your experience and knowledge of how they like things done, when they like to, whether they like to be called in the morning or the
yeah,
afternoon or on a Monday or on a Friday or whenever it
yeah,
might be, and what they like to talk about. And
yeah,
again, it allows you to build that rapport and learn a little bit more about them. For example, if you speak to if you make a booking next Monday, you could say, if you're dealing with teachers, you could say, I hope you enjoyed half term last week.
yeah,
And you can kind of relate to them and build rapport with them as much as possible.
yeah.
And
I
I think that's underplayed as well. So you mentioned your training, yes,
Yeah,
and people can be trained to an extent in terms of they can be taught as to how to what to say,
yeah,
but it comes down to personality and character of how people say it and
yeah, of
how they can build a
course.
rapport, and that's due to character and personality. That's really really key.
Yeah, because I have a
Um,
lady at work and that is a customer, and like she just calls up, we book, and she does it all the time. Like she'll be
yeah,
like, "Oh, right, Harriet," like we have a chat as if I've known her my whole life.
yeah,
And I appreciate having customers like that because it makes my job much nicer than rather than having someone that's yes, no to the questions that I
yeah,
ask. So yeah,
yeah. Absolutely. But you know what? At the same time, if we were to ask that teacher the same question, she would
yeah,
probably give exactly the same feedback.
yeah.
Is
I
that you
do
can
have,
actually connect with people on a human level, just not it's not you're professional, absolutely, yes,
yeah.
but it's just not, you don't have to be super formal all the time.
Yeah, I do have
Um,
feedback from a lady and was like, the booking process was really easy with Harriet. Like, we've really enjoyed doing it with you and stuff like that. So I do get that feedback back
yeah,
from
excellent.
the
And you can
customers as
and you can
well.
say, can you put that in an email to my manager?
Yeah, literally. So yeah. Um, in what ways can rapport be negatively and positively impacted by different communication approaches?
Yeah,
So I've just kind of put build and rapport is important with anyone, but being able to use the correct communication method um positively impacts, so it includes like consistency, honesty, and showing interest. Um, and then obviously some of the negative points I explain a little bit further on.
yeah,
So um written communication, which is classed as an email, text, or using other forms like Teams, can be positively impacted as it allows for no small talk, making the process quicker as it gets
yeah,
straight to the point. It can be reviewed time after time as it's in a written form. The message will no longer, it'll stay there forever. So if there was anything that was to crop back up, you had something to refer back to. Um, but on the other hand, you've got your negative side, as written has no tone. So for the person on the receiving end, the message may not come across in the way that the person sending it has wanted it to come across.
yeah,
So then obviously that could cause some problems.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, it also stops for the rapport to be built as there's no chance for that small talk, which obviously is when you learn things about your customer, and then um it you build that trust as well with that customer, which
Yeah,
obviously doesn't happen if you're just speaking via written words as such.
yeah, 100%.
um Verbal communication can allow for the message to come across in the correct way, as the tone can be adjusted. So, whether that's in person, on the phone, or anything like
Yeah,
that, if you can hear the person, either if they're getting annoyed, you can change your tone to make your message come across in the
yeah,
correct way.
yeah,
Um, Also, you can have several different people from different areas in the country and things like that be on that same call, so you can get multiple different opinions at the same time. You're not waiting for anyone to give a reply that might take a few days. You can get those answers and those inputs there and then.
yeah.
um
You know what, Harriet, as well, not
yeah.
you're the you're the first learner I've had on course that's mentioned that when it comes to the
Really?
communication assignment. And thinking about it now, you're absolutely right as well. Because if you're even people from different areas of the country and
Yeah.
people from different countries, they can they'll have different ways of doing things
Yeah.
and ways of speaking to people.
Yeah.
For example, certain nationalities have a reputation of, or certain ones that I can think of might have a reputation of speaking very bluntly,
Yeah.
and that to them is not that's not being rude. That's just
That's
how
normal.
they are.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting that you put that and you take that into consideration,
Hmm.
particularly when you've got a group setting and
Yeah.
you might have to accommodate that
Yeah.
and take that into consideration. Um, I've not thought of that before. I've not thought of that before. But that's a really good point.
Yeah. And then I've just put, it can also cause some awkwardness with the customer that you're building a rapport, as um oh God, what have I put? Yeah, so I've said that there isn't always much chance for a small talk, to be able to gain that trust. If you
Yeah,
are with a group of people, you're not learning stuff about that customer like you would on an individual basis. It's
yeah.
everyone's putting their input, so it's kind of not potentially always the right way as such.
No, but again, just so the example you used before with the lady that you have quite a really positive
Yeah.
relationship with, it might be more informal conversation.
Yeah.
For every one of those customers, Harriet, you might also have somebody who calls up who's very much strictly business.
Yeah.
They just want to book, they just want the facts. Is
Yeah.
it booked? Yes, and that's that. And you might learn when you call those people or when they call you, you will know through having dealt with them before, that's how they like things to be done. So
Yeah.
that's how they, so you're probably unlikely to be, to engage in small talk and do the rest of it, because that's what they want out of the interaction. That's how they want things done. And at
Yeah.
the same time, they will appreciate that it's just,
Mhm.
um, that it gets done. It's a short conversation, on to the next thing.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember, like, it's really weird, like, I remember the names of these people. Like,
yeah,
I could only speak to them once, but I remember what they're like.
yeah,
And I know that and you're right, I have customers that are very much just send me this, just send me that.
yeah,
Whereas my other lady who I deal with, a few times a year, she's like, "Oh, I want this date and this date," and I'm like, "That's fine, we can do that." And then I'll call you a week later, week before your event, to take your payment. Like,
yeah,
whereas other customers, I know that I need to send out this, 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 and this
yeah.
before I get anywhere.
That's part
So
of building, really strong relationships
yeah.
and building rapport, but also understanding your customer
Mhm.
and understanding exactly what they want.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did when I first started this job was
Mhm.
learning how to like build rapport with learners and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, the initial thing that we did the same, I did exactly the same with yourself. So we
Yeah.
asked questions. So at the end of
Mhm.
that session, I knew that you'd been to university,
Yeah.
and I knew that where you'd been to university, and I knew where you now work. And
Yeah.
we said, oh, I've got a friend who lives slightly down the road in Sudbury from you. That's not far.
Yeah.
Are you that end or are you the other end? And
Yeah.
then you make notes on this stuff against basically build a learner profile
Mhm.
where that might only been short, but then the next time that I speak to you, I can then say, how was how's this or how's that, or
Yeah.
has the learner got a dog, or are they going on holiday next week? So
Yeah.
that the next time that we can speak to them about it, we can mention it. How was your
Yeah.
holiday? How's your dog? And they're like, that's amazing. You've got like 50 learners to look after. How do you remember the name of my dog? And it's like, well, because it's important to you, so it's important. So it's important to me.
Yeah,
And
of course.
it's only little details like this, and it sound a bit weird, but if like I made like mental notes of all of these things, just like you
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
because the difference that these small details make, particularly in customer service,
Makes it a whole
um,
lot better.
it really, yeah, it does, and you'll know that, Harriet.
Yeah.
That's what you do. You're in customer service, and um, so that's a really good example as well.
And then I think my last one for that one is the non-verbal.
Yeah,
Um, so this allows you to get a better understanding of how the customer's feeling, as you'll be able to see their body language, expressions, but also once that report has been built and the customer feels more comfortable, they'll show that more. So
yeah,
as you move along the process with that relationship, more and more things might come out. So at the beginning, they might feel uncomfortable in person to tell you that something's not right, but a few months down the line, they'll actually be in a comfortable position so they can turn around to you, say, no, that's not right, and it can be
yeah,
sorted
yeah,
there and then. And also, you as a like if that was my customer and I could tell that they weren't liking something, you can reiterate and just almost go over the points that you've already spoken about just to
yeah.
make sure you're on the right page as and the same page as each other.
Yeah, that's it. That's going back to that constructive feedback
Yeah.
that we mentioned earlier. That's where building positive relationships, particularly with customers
Mhm.
and clients.
Yeah.
If you've built that professional relationship with them, even if it breaks down at one point, or even if you
Mhm.
have to deliver them bad news,
Yeah.
if it's done in the right way and using your experience for how to deal with them, doesn't mean
Yeah.
that it needs to be to the detriment of the relationship.
No.
You can do that constructively, and then you both accept it and you move on.
Yeah. Um, so then I put, it can be, impacted negatively when building your report as it can become vague and I can't even say the word, imprecise, as the actions that the customer, may be doing may not colour oh my goodness. May not match to what's being said.
Yeah,
Um, so this then could potentially lead to something going wrong or
yeah,
something is then misunderstood. So
yeah,
then it would put a hold on you building that positive rapport that you'd be looking to gain.
yeah. All of this that we're talking about now, Harriet,
Yeah.
all of this kind of rapport building and building relationships, this can all be carried over into the team building assignment.
Okay.
This is going to be really valuable to
Yeah.
use in that as well.
hmm So explain how you regulate communication in meetings you chair so everyone gets a chance to speak.
Yeah,
To allow everyone to have a chance to speak during the meeting, preparation is key as it allows the attendees to have a fair say as they've had the chance to prepare and then would be more inclined to speak.
yeah,
Because some people might not enjoy the pressure of saying, "Okay, Harriet, have you got any questions?" If they've got a time to think about some questions,
yeah,
you're going to have everyone speaking and everyone taking part.
yeah,
Have an interactive meeting. So in some case, it would mean um, that they would have to speak no matter what, but it would be in an environment that they feel comfortable because
yeah,
they're having potentially a conversation with a smaller group rather than a bigger group. Um, and then
yeah,
that smaller group might give them the confidence to actually then go on and speak in front of more people.
yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and also then you're creating a bond as well, more closer bond between your people within your meeting as well.
Yeah,
And to be able to ask open-end questions because it will encourage them to speak more with a valid answer rather than saying yes or no.
yeah,
Um, especially if like they have got the knowledge rather than asking like a question that that would get a yes or a no answer,
Yeah.
they can go on and explain, they can use their knowledge to get their correct point across, which might actually be, in some cases, something that nobody has ever thought about, and
No.
things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example, Harriet. So I can think of times where I've had managers before that have arranged meetings, and they've sent out an agenda before the meeting to
Yeah,
everybody attending, and they've even said, if anybody has any questions regarding this, give me the questions before the meeting, and I will
yeah,
address them in the meeting.
yeah,
If you don't want to do it at the time,
yeah,
just as they've then also said, if anybody doesn't understand, or they want more, or they want to come and see me afterwards, I'll be in my office for the next 15 minutes if you want to come and see me, and they might address it that way as well.
yeah. So give an example of when you've taken action whilst chairing a meeting to ensure both dominant and quiet people were both heard. So my example would be when I held my school and court forum, to
Yeah,
make sure everyone had a fair share in the meeting. I would ask, so after a topic, I would ask a question, asked if anyone had any questions. Obviously, the more spoken team members will normally say something,
yeah,
and then we'd obviously have a discussion and then move on to the next topic. But for the ones that are slightly less spoken and a bit more on the quieter side, I'd send a follow-up email after the meeting, kind of going through everything we've spoken about, and again ask that question if anyone's got any questions, to then ask me, and then I can either reply to them in an email, or we could have a small one-to-one
yeah,
discussion about those questions. And then, even though the quieter people aren't speaking in the meeting, they've still had a contribution about the meeting.
yeah. Excellent.
Um, yeah, and
Okay,
then I hadn't got on to this point.
that's okay. We can cover those. Actually, those will also be covered in the next unit as well.
Okay.
SBI. Wow. So overall, what were your feelings on the communication assignment?
Yeah, it was really good. Again, like, obviously I'd done this sort of stuff at uni, so, and it's more of the fact of being able to put a name to what I do, because
Yeah,
I do some of this stuff, but I probably just thought, oh, it's just natural. But actually, there is a meaning, there is a name behind this, so I can,
yeah,
go off and improve certain things. And I think also, yeah, that's probably, and reading it out loud,
yeah.
I did better than I thought I had.
Yeah, which is
So,
which is often the case. And again, the reason why we do that, Harriet, is it allows you to expand on certain things as well.
yeah, yeah,
So give those extra examples and expand on the questions, which is why I want to use this recording
yeah,
um, under the communication assignment. So
mhm,
that's basically done now. You can upload that to Bud,
yeah. Okay, cool,
and I will also upload this recording
cool.
to Bud under the same thing as well. But the reason why that is useful, as I say, everything, even though it's a long way off,
Yeah,
everything that we do is geared towards endpoint assessment. And the more
yeah,
we can talk through these examples and come up with real examples now,
the better.
the better. Spot
Yeah,
on. Right, I'm going to pause that now, because that is all we need.